Hey everybody, my name is John Capobianco. I'm a developer advocate for Cisco training and certifications in their training boot camps program. We call them ABCs, Automation Boot Camps. And in preparation for Cisco Live, I've made a little Webex bot that started as something that presenters could use to send Webex cards into their channel or their room for their session. And I thought I would go an extra step and make it even more flexible and more available for public use. So the idea here is that you can run a command. Well, you have to install the bot, run a simple command, and then answer a series of questions. The bot will transform those questions into what's known as an adaptive card and send it to your room. It's pretty neat. And I've made it so that you could put in anything you want. And then more advanced, we'll get into what are known as environment variables, where let's say you're going to be reusing the same title and room ID and Webex room, and right, if all of the information is going to be the same except for maybe your description or the URL you want to send them, we can export these as environment variables to reduce the number of questions and reuse our answers. And we'll get to that. But let's take a quick tour of the technology at use here. So this, if you haven't seen this is an adaptive card. And as you can see, it has images and it has hyperlinks. And under developer.webex.com/buttons-and-cards-designer, you can come into this and design your adaptive card. Well, you can see here that the payload is just JSON. My favorite structured data type. So that's the payload that we send. So what do you think I do with it? That's right. I Jinja template this card format and substitute in variables where the user has put the response in for their image, for the header, for their title, for this type of information. All of this is going to be dynamically generated from the input the user sends. Now what I'm going to do is call up my Readme file, and let's try to do this along with the Readme. So here's a sense of the questions you'll be asked and the adaptive card that it generates. This is for my Cisco Live session. And the hyperlink works. It has the title of the speakers, the description, the location, the time, and I've made these generic fields available for your adaptive card. Now, where do we need to start? Well, we need to start in Webex and we need to create a space. And I've created a space, and I have some demos in there already, called bot testing. So there is that adaptive card that I've sent in, and I'm going to be sending in the examples into this room. So we need to go to our plus, create a space, and now that we have a space, what do we do with it? So what we need to do is find our room ID for that space. Now in the Readme file, if we just follow along with the Readme, right, get a 24-hour token and room ID. And you can click this link and it will take you to the rooms list, or the long way would be documentation. And we want to find messaging, and we want to find the reference, and we want to find rooms. This will take you to this view, which then we click on rooms, or the hyperlink from the Readme file. Now that we're in here, there's two things that we need to do. We need to copy our token. Well, first we need to log in to Webex to work with this. All right, so now that I've logged in, you can see I have my logo. So I've logged in, and you can see that we can click copy on the bearer token. So we want to copy that bearer token, and it will say that it's valid for 12 hours after logging into the site and should not be used for production apps. If you want to make this more permanent, you're going to sign up for an actual bot with Webex, but this will get you started and be good for 12 hours. So I'm going to copy my token, and let me, because I believe that's going to give me a new token, let me just save my token. So make note of that token, keep it secure, keep it safe, don't share it with anyone. It will give you access to manipulate your Webex. Now, how do we find our room ID? Because we need the combination of the room ID and that token. So we can just click Run here in the browser, and it's going to give all the list of all of my rooms. And there is my bot testing room and the ID that I need. So copy out that ID, right? I'm going to put it in here under my room ID. It's the same room ID. Now, how else can we do this? Once we have our token, we can leave the WebEx space. I'm going to use that image later. And again, so this shows you how to do that inside of the browser, or you can see that we can launch Postman and we can go to that rooms, not the room list, just the rooms, right? So you can see here, get, and then the rooms, and then my authentication is going to be that token. Let me refresh my token and hit send, and then we will get back all of our rooms. And here is that bot testing room. So again, there's where we can get the ID from that room. We could send messages in, post text into that room with the room ID and just some simple markdown, but we want to make an adaptive card, which is where the Python comes in. So again, according to the instructions, that's all we need, the room ID and our token. And the next steps are installing the bot. Now the first steps are for Linux and the next steps are for Windows. Let's do it in both environments just to test out the instructions. So for Linux, I'm going to launch Ubuntu WSL on my Windows machine, or this could be any, Linux box. And it just wants to check that we have Python 3 installed, and I do. So what I'm going to do, it mentions to install py3venv and to set up a virtual environment. So let's go ahead and set up Python 3-mvenv, and let's just call this Twitter demo Webex bot. So then what we need to do is activate that virtual environment with source and then Twitter demo bin activate. You'll see that the CLI changes to be the name of our virtual environment. And now, according to this, our next steps are to pip install WebExMessage. So pip install pywebexmessage. This will go ahead and pull it down from pypi and install it. And if you want to do a pip freeze to confirm that pywebexmessage is installed. Now we just simply say message room. All right, so I've decided to actually make a folder called output. So, right, you can do an mkdir output and then cd into output, and I'm in this empty folder called output, and I'm doing that for a reason, and I'll show you that reason. So now that everything's pip installed, all we need to do is say message room, and tab will complete this. And I believe there's a help. There is a help. So if you do -- help, it will show you that they're all required fields, and they're all text and a little brief description of what you're going to send. So you're going to be asked for the room ID, the token, your image, your small header, the title, the description, the location, date and time, speakers, a URL, and a URL label, right? And you could pass all these in as right directly in here. You could say message room -- room ID and fill all this out, or you could just press enter and it will be interactive. All right, so now I'm at the interactive prompts, and right, we need the room ID first, and then we need our token, and then what we're going to do is put a URL to an image, and I found this nice Cisco Live image. Let's use that. And some small header text, YouTube video for YouTube instructional video. And the title of the session is How to Use pywebexmessage. How to use pywebexmessage from Python to send Webex Adaptive Cards automatically. The location is from my basement. It is May 8th. It is 10:52 a.m. The speaker is John Capone. Yanko, and the URL, let's make it my URL, automateyournetwork.ca, and the label for a button for that is automate your network. Press enter. It displays what we've sent. So take this in. This is the payload, and you can see there's our room ID and all of the other information. Now, if you type ls, there is a JSON file. So if we do code dot, we could actually see the payload of the message that we sent. And this is good in case you want to review what you've sent or if there's any problems. And the other thing is we get the following WebEx sent, that JSON file, with a status code of 200. That's good. Status code 200 means it should be sitting in the WebEx room. And if I go to my WebEx room, there is the message with the image, YouTube instructional video, how to use pywebexmessage sent at 10:52 from my basement, the description, the speaker, and then the interactive URL button that takes you to my homepage. So that is from Linux. Now let's try one from Windows using the Windows instructions. So let's go back into the Readme. And the Readme says for Windows, it's very much the same thing. We're going to make a Windows virtual environment, right? So here's the Windows instructions. So start mcmd, and I'm going to go to root, and let's do Python 3 mvenv, and we'll just call this YouTube demo. And then we're going to activate that by typing in YouTube demo /scripts/activate, and you'll see now I'm inside of the virtual environment. So now we should be able to do pip install pywebexmessage, and it will install the application. We can do CLS to clear the screen. Let's make a directory called output and cd into output, right? And there's nothing in here. And now we just say message room. And it should, there we go. So let's send something back to that room ID from Windows now. And that same token. And the header image URL, let's use that nice Cisco Live image. And this is a Windows demonstration. Pywebex message from Windows. This is showing that the library works in Windows 2. The location is, let's say, Windows CLI, Windows command prompt, right? May 8th, 10:56 a.m. John Capobianco. Automate your network. Automate your network. Same idea, we get the JSON payload, we get the 200 status code. If I do a dir, there's a JSON file that we could look at. And if we hop back into the WebEx room, here is the WebEx demonstration from Windows. Now, you're going to say to yourself, that seems pretty cool, but I don't really want to type in all that stuff every time. So now we can use environment variables. What you're going to do is say export room ID equals, and then the room ID. It will automatically answer these questions, and you can just leave the ones you want to make specific. So let's take a look at environment variables. We'll do this in Windows, and let's see how this goes. All right, so I'm back in my Windows command prompt, and what I'm going to do is use the set word and set all of these as environment variables for reuse and to automatically answer my question, right? So set that should be room ID. I made a mistake there. Set room ID equals, and then the room ID, and then set token. And let's grab the token. And we're going to set the image to that nice Cisco Live image. And then we're going to set the header to be YouTube demo. And we're going to set the title as a YouTube instructional video for how to use pywebexmessage to send adaptive cards. And then we're going to set, let's leave description. That's what I'm going to leave. I'm not going to set a description, but we're going to set the location as my basement, set the date as May 8th, set the time as 10, let's just do 11 a.m., set the speakers as John Capobianco, set the URL to my automateyournetwork.ca, set the URL label as automate your network. Now, when I run message room, it should only ask me for the description, right? This was sent using environment variables in Windows. Bang, that's it. So now if I take a little time and pre-stage my environment variables, and we look in the room, you can see YouTube demo, my title, everything is saved except for that description. Right? Now you could do this with, maybe you want to send a unique URL throughout your message, throughout your session, or throughout your conversation. Just don't set the URL environment variable or the URL label, and you could be asked every time. Now we can do the same thing in Linux. And let me just clear my screen and show you in Linux. Now Linux, it's slightly different. We use the export keyword, right? So what we're going to do is the same thing. We're going to say export room ID equals, and then we're going to grab our room ID. We're going to export the token equals. Going to export the image to be that nice Cisco Live image. Export the header as YouTube demo from Linux. Export the title, YouTube instructional video with environment variables. Export the, let's just do the location. Let's leave description, basement. Export the date, May 8th. Export, I could do that in quotes maybe. Export the time, 11 a.m. Export the speakers, John Capobianco, and then let's not export the URL or the URL label. All right, so we're all set up here, and now we just say message room. The description of the session is, this is automate your network. Basement. Okay, so I didn't set the location. The URL is https automateyournetwork.ca, automate your network, and we'll have the adaptive card this time from Linux. Now let's fix that environment variable. Export location equals basement. And then let's send it again with a different URL. pyats resources. I don't know why my location doesn't like the environment variable. I'll have to look into that. Maybe there's a problem with my code. I will fix that. Location is basement. And now this URL, let's just go get an arbitrary pyats URL. They're accelerating your DevOps page. And this one is pyats resources. Right? So then you get the idea that, right, the link now takes you to the pyats resources. My original link takes me to automate your network. So that is the bot. Feel free to use it. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions or need any help. It's available on pypi, so you just pip install it, and the code is open source and it's available on GitHub. Happy botting, everybody. Thanks again.